Welcome to the 2023 Ogden City Mayor Candidate Debate for Ogden City, hosted by the Weber Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 1. This is a recorded event posted on social media, technology permitting, to allow those who are unable to attend to view it later. My name is Derek Fisher, and I am the president of the Weber Fraternal Order of Police. I represent officers and deputies in all the local agencies in Weber and Morgan County. Our lodge was named after the Weber River that runs through both counties. Our mission is to serve our members. We do this by providing relief, events, activities, and serving as representatives to the administrations and city leaders. We also focus on building better relationships with the communities we serve through service projects, events, and community outreach. Mayors in our communities are the leaders and give the final direction on our public safety mission and how we complete those missions. They are the leaders who work with the city council to determine how the city operates and grows. The Weber FOP invited both candidates to participate in this event. The topic of our debate is public safety. All public safety team members, police, fire, and dispatch were invited. Everyone was offered the opportunity to submit questions, both public and public safety. Some important dates. The election will be held Tuesday, November 21st. The ballots will be mailed out to voters beginning October 31st. Questions were accepted via email before the debate. Questions with the debate were chosen based on the given topic and community requests. Due to having a limited amount of time, not all questions may be asked in the debate. However, all questions not asked will be sent to each candidate to respond. Responses will be posted on our Facebook page. Time permitting, after the prepared questions are answered, attending public may ask questions of the candidates. This will be handled by the event moderator. Introduction to the topic. Law enforcement is becoming a more undesirable career field for a multitude of reasons. Retirement's been raised to 25 years and the retirement plan is not competitive with surrounding states. Leniency was placed on offenders and stricter guidelines on enforcement. And the officers serving the community. And for each agency, the lack of value placed on the officers. The Ogden Police Department has a history of producing top-grade officers despite the current negative view of law enforcement. Ogden City has adjusted wages a few years ago based on a study that was years old by the time it was implemented. Ogden City is currently redoing that study, but once again will be behind in wages in the surrounding agencies. Ogden officers are underpaid compared to agencies in the county, let alone across the state, while handling more calls per officer compared to any officer in the state. Additionally, FBI officer to population comparison based on the census shows that police are understaffed in slots alone by over 50 officers. Both the wages and staffing have never been the priority to plan ahead for and have left the city scrambling to find means to try to bring the wages up to a comparable level. We'll introduce the moderators now. Akir here, behind me on the left, and be one of the primary moderators, is a Weber State University senior and staff member, an advocate, accomplished speaker, dedicated researcher, former pig farmer, and proud owner of world's best cat dad mug. Akir's commitment to academic excellence and community engagement is further exemplified through the work with the Weber State Speech and Debate team and on contributions to microbiology research, both of which have received national recognition on campus. Akir is an active member of the national societies such as American Democracy Project and Civic Solutions through the Olene S. Walker Institute of Political and Public Service, and serving as Vice President of the Weber State University's Presidential Leadership Fellows. Kyle is our other moderator. Kyle is a Weber State University junior studying digital media communications and sociology. Their determination to develop their community is exemplified through their work as an Eagle Scout, a college writing consultant, and an advocate, and a competitor with Weber State Speech and Debate team. A filmmaker with the statewide prestige and researcher with their degree. Kyle plans to work as a data engineer to further his understanding of society's workings. I'm going to let the moderator to go through the rules and let him take over the debate from here.
Perfect, thank you. I'm Akir Rell. I'll be the initial moderator tonight. So for the rules tonight, each candidate will be allotted a maximum of 2 minutes for each answer to our question. If the other candidate is addressed during the answer, that candidate has a maximum of 1 minute to respond. To begin our round today, each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes for introductions and 2 minutes for closing. At our discretion today, questions may be followed up on, added, or negated. So with that in mind, Mr. Nadolski, go ahead with your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the FOP for organizing and hosting tonight's debate. This is a great opportunity for us to talk about really important issues, so thank you everybody also for being here. As the moderator mentioned, my name is Ben Nadolski. I'm running to serve as your mayor, and if you don't know me personally, I think I know most of you guys, but for those that are watching online, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I came here in 1996 to play football at Weber State. I got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice with the law enforcement emphasis, and that was the time where I really began to make Ogden my home. Ever since I was about 10 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a game warden. I wanted to work in wildlife management, and I mostly fulfilled that, except I didn't become a game warden. I took a little bit of a different turn in my career and went with the biology route and administrative route, but I've been with the Division of Wildlife for over 20 years now. I currently supervise operations for the Division of Wildlife in northern Utah. Before that, I was a biologist, but also served a role as legislative affairs coordinator for the agency and worked on behalf of the agency and the governor's office on a number of public lands issues. I truly believe that experience matters. As an agency at the Division of Wildlife, we have over 600 employees. About 80 of those are game wardens or full-time peace officers. Some of the officers in the crowd may have been in academy with my colleagues at the division. That includes, in my current operation, I coordinate with the lieutenant, 3 sergeants and 11 officers, a K-9 officer and an investigator. That is my daily work. I've worked for 2 directors, both of which were former chiefs of law enforcement before being director. We work in a very structured environment in my agency, especially on the law enforcement side. Now that doesn't replace my experience with being an officer. I've never been an officer on the ground, but it has been an interesting experience to be an administrator of an agency, coordinating daily with law enforcement and law enforcement operations. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Like Ben, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you to the Fraternal Order of the Police, and thank you all for coming to engage in this process. On any other year, a Friday night in October, I'd probably be at a haunted house. So I appreciate the sacrifice of missing out on the spooky season to be here to talk about something else that's spooky, which is politics. Like the moderator said, my name is Taylor Knuth, and I'm running to be the next mayor of Ogden City. A little bit about me. I grew up just outside of town with a single mom and 3 siblings. My mom often worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. And so at the age of 12, I got my first job working for the Standard Examiner as a paper boy. I learned from some of the best people in my life how to work hard, how to be resilient and be gritty, much like Ogden. And when I moved to Ogden in 2011, I learned even more from incredible professors, from incredible neighbors, from incredible Ogdenites doing incredible work to keep our community safer, to keep our community a little bit more connected, and ultimately to build up our community. You know, we've crafted a policy agenda that includes getting back to the basics of good government, because I've seen firsthand what can happen when the basic functions of government are met and the good that can come from those basic functions. For me, the basics of good government are building community, creating connections with our neighbors, and preserving the character of our city. And we have to do all of those things at once if we are to confront the challenges that we have as a growing city in the best economy in the nation, which is the state of Utah, which also has the lowest unemployment, the youngest population, and the overall fastest growing state. The growth is coming, and we're ready to confront that conversation head on. I'm really excited to dig into the details of what public safety means, and thank you again for being here. I look forward to this debate.
I'm sure you've only been asked for an introduction a few times on your campaign, so thank you for sharing your website with us. But thank you for your answers here. For this next question, in 30 seconds, why should Ogden voters trust you? Mr. Canoe.
You should trust me because I've been doing this work in our community, the work of building community, for over a decade. I started my career in public service working for United Way of Northern Utah as a community engagement director, really bringing resources to the table to meet the most basic needs of our community and understanding the incredible apparatus which is non-government organizations in our city, as well as government organizations that are dedicated to doing good. So really becoming the mayor of Ogden really is a continuation of some of the most important work I've done in my life, which is serve our community.
Thank you. I hope you'll trust me because I hope that you've trusted me through my experience in my 8 years on the city council. It has been a real challenge to be an elected official. It's not an easy job. If you've been tracking on my service, I hope that you have seen, and I know that I have served with integrity. There have been times where the truth is not always popular. There's been times where disagreeing isn't always popular. But I've always felt it's important for me to speak and vote my conscience. So I hope you'll trust me because I will speak my conscience, and my conscience will be based on my best judgment and my best listening. Thank you.
Homelessness is on the rise, not only nationally, but locally as well. And as a mayor, how would you plan on ensuring that the unsheltered are treated with dignity and respect, while also maintaining accountability to keep our community safe and secure for all citizens? Mr. Nadolski.
So dignity, respect, and accountability, those are fundamental values of human decency and human life. I think that we as a city need to take a leadership role, starting not just with Anna. We can't put everything on our homeless advocates. As the mayor must play a leadership role across the county because this is not just an Ogden City issue, it's a county-wide issue. And our mayor needs to be at the table and helping our homeless advocates and coordinators get through a lot of the barriers and the challenges that they're facing every single day. I think we need to look at our unsheltered population and make sure that we're understanding them on an individual basis, understanding what their pathways were to homelessness, and providing them and connecting them with the assets and resources that we have. Where we're lacking resources, for example, deeply affordable housing. We as a city and me as a mayor need to make sure that we're providing access to deeply affordable housing opportunities that are both combined with the services that they need on site if possible, 24 hours a day if possible, making sure that they're connected with those resources so that we are not having people in our community that are falling through the cracks. The biggest challenge that I hear from staff who work in this field across the county is that it's really hard to make sure that we are finding the people that need the service, finding the services and connecting them with it, and then making sure that they're going step to step to step. If those services are spread out across the county, they're gonna fall through the cracks in between those steps. So we need to bring those resources as close together, make sure that we have our advocates taking them step to step to step, because those are the ways that we can help make sure that people find the help that they need and get back on their feet and stay in stable housing. Thanks.
I'll start by saying that nobody is above the law in our community, housed or unhoused. And any crime committed in our community should be a crime that is ultimately held accountable by our justice system. Now, what I think often gets missed is this conversation of humanity and dignity, especially as it relates to our unhoused population. You know, I have a personal family member who has met the definition of chronic homelessness for about 30 years now. So not only is this personal, and I believe in the inherent dignity of every human that we encounter, especially from a public safety perspective, but it's also the fiscally responsible thing to do in engaging with our unhoused community in ways that are proactive. I just got back from an economic development trip for work where we visited Milwaukee, and Milwaukee was just awarded a federal recognition as having the most homelessness per capita of any major city in the United States. And they got to this point by adopting a housing first model, which means that before we address the underlying mental health conditions, substance use disorder, et cetera, we look for a home for our unhoused neighbors and then address those issues. It's a model that is not perfect. If there were a perfect model to adopt in the conversation of meeting our unsheltered neighbors where they're at, we would have solved it by now. And beyond addressing the current crisis, which is our unhoused population, we need to be mindful of the people in our community who are just one emergency away from joining that the unsheltered population. The latest census marked 14.2% of our population here in Ogden as people experiencing poverty. We know that number is probably underreported, and so there's probably more than that is what I'm trying to say. But what we need to do as a city is understand that the best way to address homelessness is perhaps to prevent it in the first place, which is why we've proposed developing a housing stability division to work hand in hand with our homeless service advocates who are in desperate need of an expansion of their resources to address this community with urgency that the moment demands.
Still on the topic of housing, communities across the state are concerned about housing in their communities, particularly the lack of housing. Within the last few years, Ogden has seen numerous apartment complexes being built that are believed to be contributing to some of the shortages. So, in 1 minute and 30 seconds, which will be our time going forward, Mr. Knuth, how will you address the concerns of the city housing crisis?
Yeah, these are very real concerns. I have a background in economic development, and this is a conversation that we're ready to confront head on. We need to be mindful that the proliferation of apartments that we saw in the early 2021 and 2022 was primarily due to federal incentives that allowed developers to build these apartments with less financial risk. Those development incentives are gone from the federal government, and the demand for multifamily dwellings in our city has naturally decreased to way below what we were doing in 2022 and 2021. So, but that said, we as a city, we cannot pump the brakes when it comes to growth in our city. The state legislature has made it very hard to limit the growth of a municipal government. And as the fastest growing city or state in the country, we have a responsibility to plan for this growth. We have won a win in the budget this year by having $700,000 allocated to create a general plan in our community. That general plan will help guide our growth. We've also proposed the expansion of the Own in Ogden program. I would not be a homeowner today had it not been for that program. And I want to especially expand the Own in Ogden program as it relates to our public servants like police officers and school teachers, because I want our police officers and our school teachers to be our neighbors moving forward as we continue to grow as a city.
Thank you. So housing is probably the #1 issue that I hear when I'm on the campaign trail. And when we talk about shortage of housing, I think the #1 shortage is opportunity to own a home. When you look at the mix of home types that are being built in Ogden, we have about 80% rental being built versus 20% being built, and that ratio needs to be flipped. So, but it's not good enough just to build owner occupied. We need to make sure that that's homes that are within attainment for people and a home that people are able to afford. For me, I think there are a lot of opportunities in Ogden to use current RDA lands and use the RDA and leverage those opportunities to deliver for home ownership opportunity. How do we make sure that we keep those affordable? That's going to be a challenge because the entire market across the country is unaffordable. But when the RDA owns the land, that gives us an opportunity to decide what that land value is. If necessary, if we were to provide incentives for economic development, I'd be a lot more comfortable with incentives if that incentive is going toward the wealth of our own people. And if we're using the RDA to build owner-occupied housing, I think that we can do that. I think there's opportunities for density bonuses for developers. I think that we can shrink the size of the lot that homes are on so that we use less water, build more homes, reduce the cost for the homeowner. I think there's opportunities within the Own Ogden program, which does already provide for opportunities for police and fire and employees for down payment assistance. But we need to build new homes so that state down payment assistance can be leveraged as well. Thank you.
Moving on from our housing topic now, how are we going to connect with the community? We currently are in an age of technology and social media. Ogden City Council has made various efforts to reach out and connect with community members, but as is the case with most politics, it's hard to get the community to engage until it affects them individually. So, Mr. Nadolski, if you were elected as mayor, what would your administration change to connect more with your community?
Thank you. Absolutely, it's a challenge. I think the whole country is experiencing, not just our Ogden City Council, but online information is important, but it's not always the best way to engage because it can create a toxic environment for
The comment sections can just spiral out of control, and it just doesn't create the best dynamic. I think face-to-face, in-person opportunities are the best. I'm sitting here looking at Diana Lopez on the front row. She's worked her guts out to make sure that we're hosting the kind of events that bring community out and bring us to them. So I would absolutely want to continue that kind of work. But I also want to make sure that we're doing more than that. A big thing that's important for me, and I don't know how many officers are already coaching youth sports. I know that there are some. I know there's a lot of firefighters that do as well. Most of the time we do that on our own time, and that's just how we give back to our community, to our youth, and to our kids. I've been able to personally engage with people, with families, with youth, by coaching those kids and mentoring them. I get to know their families. I get to know their extended families at practice and at games. I would love to explore opportunities for our police department to engage more with programming at the Marshall White Center, both to honor the legacy and the history of that facility and the man that it's named after. Marshall White was really passionate about recreation. I'd love to create a culture in our department that equals that and matches that passion and helps create new connections in our community.
So just to clarify, you discussed face-to-face meetings as well as coaching youth sports. That's how you plan to increase the community's connection to city council members and yourself as a mayor specifically?
Those are the avenues I would like to leverage.
I also think there are opportunities to be a lot more proactive with the work that we do. Sometimes we're responding to things, and I think that we could have PIO and video and all kinds of content that's showing the work that we're doing, inviting community leaders on ride-alongs, taking them out with us before there's a crisis so they know the work that we're doing. That's a really important way to connect with people.
All right, Mr. Knuth, the same question for you. If elected, what would you do to change and connect with your community?
Yeah, community engagement is honestly what saved my life. I grew up in a community center just outside of town, and going into 7th grade, this brand new community center opened up, and for the first time in my young life, I was not going home to an empty apartment. I said earlier to make top ramen and watch television. I was going to share space with my peers and trusting adults. And that space, the 3 years that I spent in that after-school program, really gave me the skills and the tools and the knowledge to lay a foundation for my future self to build on. So it's no surprise to me that I became a public servant because it was the community that helped shape my life. And for the last decade, I've been engaged with our community. I've been the chair of the Emergency Food and Shelter Board, working with public safety apparatus to ensure resources for our unsheltered population. I was a trustee on the Homeless Trust Fund. I was on the Homeless Services Coordination Council. I've held meetings with, the sheriff sitting in this room and with Chief Watt in summers gone by. These are strategies that I'm not unfamiliar with. I would, in fact, say that I'm an expert on the topic of engaging our community, and I'm ready to bring that culture, bring that knowledge to the mayor's office to make this the most human-centered, people-engaged administration in the state, setting an example for other municipalities on how to get our community involved.
All right. There's no question that you are an expert in this, but how would you use this? You discussed a lot of your experience and your knowledge, but what would that look like? 30 seconds.
Absolutely. I proposed a revision of the way the city does our community boards and commissions. When I was the chair of the Ogden City Diversity Commission, I actually wrote a recommendation to the city council on how to fix the structural issues with our city-appointed boards and commissions. This wasn't just for the Diversity Commission, it was for the Sustainability Commission, for the Sports Commission, all of which have an incredible amount of disconnect in actually influencing the topics that they're appointed to serve on behalf of the mayor and the city council.
This is a venue that, of course, is working to inform our first responders and the servants in the Ogden community. So what have you done, Mr. Knuth, to support your first responders in this community, and how have you participated with the Ogden Police Department?
Yeah, so a few summers ago, I actually partnered with Chief Watt and the chief administrative officer at the time, Mark Johnson, when I was the chair of the Ogden City Diversity Commission. You know, I think the public scrutiny on law enforcement officers at the time was pretty high, and I remember getting a call in the late spring of that year from Chief Watt, and he said, "Taylor, what do we do? Is there something the Diversity Commission can do to help build relationships?" And I said, "I'm not quite sure, but I know that Vice Chair Adrian Andrews and we can help start that conversation." So for several months, we met every Thursday at 7:30 with Mark Johnson and Chief Watt to have a conversation. And throughout that entire summer, we convened community conversations to address this topic. And so not only that, but I also was a participant in the Citizens Police Academy in 2018. I learned a great deal from Diana Lopez and the other officers who run this program. So it's a topic that I've tried to understand more and more each and every year. Not only that, but building a relationship with Chief Young and other officers on the force, and Diana Lopez. You know, I have, like Ben, I've never been a public safety officer, and so I really value this idea of bringing our community together, getting back to the basics of good government, and holding a conversation about how we can best build empathy and build relationships with our law enforcement officers and the community at large.
Same question.
Thank you. So
The first thing I did, because I wanted to learn more, is I asked to participate in ride-alongs. I've done a number of ride-alongs with our police and with our fire. I've seen a lot of things, and I learned a lot in those experiences. I participated in the community police academy. I think I was a member of the first cohort to graduate from that, but don't quote me on that. But I definitely was probably I know I'm the only council member to have volunteered to be tased, and surely I'm the only one that cracked a tooth being tased. So I carry that reminder with me every day as well. You know, all joking aside, there are also very serious issues. There was, as every officer and everybody in this room knows, we lost an officer in the line of duty, and I took a week of vacation off of my work to travel to Washington, D.C. to support the family, to support the officers, and that was also an important experience because I got to connect with officers and the family and see the tragedy, see the feelings, meet the people who were impacted by the work on the street. I've been on the city council for 8 years. We've had a lot of challenges in that 8 years. We've also had breakthroughs. I've learned a lot being in service while all of our officers are on the streets in service. Things happen. I think one of the best things that we can do as elected officials when something serious happens is to stay quiet and make sure that the process is transparent and fair, is taking place in a fair and justice-based way.
Awesome. On the same topic, it sounds like you both have a deep appreciation and respect for the work that our law enforcement and our public safety and our community service individuals do for us. So, naturally, we must ask, what is your view on police reform? Mr. Canoe.
I'm first? I went first the last. I'll go first if you want me to.
We'll have this be a minute, and then Mr. Nadolski will actually answer first for us.
Okay, 1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay, I think the term police reform refers to something that I don't support. Police reform is something, using the term in popular culture, suggests that police work as it happens today is broken. I don't believe that's the case. So from that regard, no, I don't believe in police reform. I think police work is something that's built up over time. It's based on case law. It's based on experience. It's a national industry where we are constantly and continually refining our work, just like any other industry. But I don't think we need to go in and clean sweep all of the work that's been done throughout the industry and start over. I think what we need to do is make sure that we as a community are building those relationships with our community and making sure that we are following the law and following the policies strictly, that we are judging ourselves through the performance of that objectively and not subjectively. And I think that creates an atmosphere of trust and builds an opportunity for us and our community to make sure that they know that we are providing world-class law enforcement and doing it in a way that is transparent and worthy of our trust.
So do you support police reform?
No.
Okay. Mr.
Will you restate the question in its entirety, please?
So what is your view on police reform?
You know, like any department in the city, we should be innovating whenever the opportunity is there. And you know what? Ogden Police Department is actually an incredible case study for the rest of the nation to learn what that looks like. In 2007, when our United Crime Report was at its highest, our administration at the time created the Crime Reduction Unit. And from 2007 to 2008, we saw a steep decline in the crimes committed in Ogden as a response to that crime reduction unit. Going further, in 2017, Ogden Police Department created an officer training school. Again, we saw a steep decline in the crime that was committed in our city. So do I support the larger conversation of police reform? I think it's complicated. Do I support a department of law enforcement officers dedicated to continually innovating their work? Absolutely.
Okay. Now, our next question going to be, again, another minute. What changes would you make to the Ogden City Police Department?
I'm first on this one. Yep, you know, 1 minute. Okay, so when we talk about getting back to the basics of good government, it really does start and end with public safety. And what we know about being a police officer is that it's an incredibly tough job. We are asking our officers to put their life on the risk every time they go out, and they could be responding to a call where violence against another person is happening, and then the next call they could be responding to a noise complaint. So we're talking about the expansion of community-oriented policing so that we can reduce the number of calls that our officers are responding to on any given moment. We're also talking about the creation of a 411 line to ensure that non-emergency calls are not added to our officers' roster. Oh, that was set for 1.5 minutes. I'm so sorry. I'm out of time. I have 20 minutes? Okay. Sorry. So not only the 411 line, but really acknowledging the difficulty which is being a law enforcement officer in our city and ensuring that they have the resources, the tools, and the leadership to get the job done in a way that yields the best outcomes for as many people in our community as possible.
Thank you. First thing I want to do is make sure that our compensation is not lagging behind the competition, but ahead of the competition. If our studies are taking too long and we're not keeping our salary schedules fresh, we need to get through the one that we're working on now and then immediately start the next one so that we can make sure that we are a little bit ahead of our neighbors so that we are always winning. I also want to make sure that we're creating a culture that you guys want to be a part of. The officers that I've spoken with want to be a part of an organization that has opportunities for movement within specialized units. You want to work in an organization that you trust, that you know that if you're following the rules and the policies and the laws while you're out on the streets and you're following the training that you're provided, that you're going to be safe from anything that would come down from your administration. I want to make sure that you have a department that you believe in, that you know when you're out at work, if you're in the bounds of the law and the policy, that you are going to stay safe, and that you have a mayor that will uphold that standard as well.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that anybody that's running for mayor wants our law enforcement to be safe. The question was, what changes would you make? Not what actionable items would you take in your administration?
I started with the compensation, and then I talked about changing culture. Culture starts at the top. I know that y'all are police officers and I'm not, but it's my responsibility as a mayor, number one, to provide for public safety in this city. I am very much accountable too, and I want to make sure that we create a culture where your mayor is connected to the work that you do, that there is communication all the way through, and that we have a relationship with the FOP to make sure that we have feedback loops to make sure that the work that you're doing is happening in the way that my chief is telling me that it is and my administration is telling me that it is. Because I think it's really important that you guys have a culture that you trust.
Thank you for clarification. Mr. Knuth, what changes would you make to the Ogden City Police Department?
Yeah, I've talked about the expansion of community-oriented policing, and I've talked about the creation of a 411 line to directly address the overburden of a high call volume within our police force. Talking about community-oriented policing, when we say that we want cops to get out of their cars and onto the streets, it's not designed to say that our cops are just sitting in their cars all day. In fact, it's the actual opposite. We know that they're in their cars working from call to call to call to call. And so when we talk about community-oriented policing, it means resourcing our department in a way that allows them to reduce their call volume and address the underlying causes of crime.
Still on the theme of our venue, an officer has alleged misconduct within Ogden City. How would you respond to that situation in 1 minute, Mr. Kinnear?
You know, this is not dissimilar to some of the headlines that have been happening in Ogden City. And I think that as with any process, for any employee of our city, due process is necessary. Now, with our law enforcement officers, that due process is even more robust than a normal human resources process for a non-credentialed, non-badged officer or employee of the city. So I do believe that in situations where the character or the decisions made by any employee of Ogden City, law enforcement included, should be put through the proper channels first, especially before a mayor is inserting their personal opinion in the public space, because that could actually undermine the process of investigating this alleged misconduct.
Just to clarify, is it an officer that's alleging it, or there's alleged misconduct by an officer?
An officer has allegedly exhibited misconduct.
Okay, thank you. So I absolutely believe that in instances like this, it is not the mayor or any politician's place to put their thumb on the scale of justice. There is a process for that exact reason. And I think anytime an officer is accused of something, it's hugely important that we do not make political assumptions. When I say a politician should remain quiet, what I meant was a politician should not be expressing opinions about guilt or innocence when these things happen. What must happen is that that process is activated, that it's a process that the officers can trust, and that they know that they will be viewed and compared with the policies and the laws that were in place at the time that they were alleged to have caused this misconduct. When that is happening, it is critical that they are viewed objectively and not subjectively. There should be no difference between how you're analyzed or how you're evaluated. It must be based on objective law and policy at that time. It's never okay to go back and change the law and then go back and reevaluate.
Awesome, thank you. So, I think we both have discussed the need to make Ogden City's compensation for police officers more competitive. That's all well and good, but how will you increase compensation, pay, and benefits for public safety personnel in Ogden City? Mr. Nadolski.
Thank you. So if we're going to be looking at compensation, we're going to have to be talking about the general fund. The general fund is a limited resource, but public safety is a huge draw on the general fund. So if we're looking at increasing the general fund, but making sure that we're not doing it by increasing the tax rate, then we need to make sure that we're spending that money very wisely. What I would do is make sure that I would look at the spending that we're doing in economic development, make sure that we're not spending money we don't need to. I would move some of that spending over to BDO lease revenue to free up general fund. I would also like to make sure that we're leveraging the RDA to create new growth, which is the only way that we can capture more revenue within our general fund. So I want to leverage the RDA, leverage economic development to create more, quote, new growth, use that new growth and that new revenue to provide for the most basic, most fundamental need, which is our police and fire officials. And it's not just good enough to provide more money per pay. We need to provide more police officers and more firefighters to make up for the size of our city as well.
Awesome. You know, as an economic development professional, this is a conversation I have all day. You know, small businesses are crucial. They're also way better bang for our buck to invest in small businesses to address our pretty shallow sales tax revenue as a city. The answer to addressing pay for our officers is in the expansion of small businesses and the increasing of sales tax. Without that, we are an unbalanced economy. We need small businesses, we need big businesses, and we need workforce development to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our economy. And you know, as an economic development professional, we need to look at ways to activate our streetscapes. We need to look at ways to increase foot traffic to our small businesses, especially in our downtown core. And this is something that I talk about all day, every day, is trying to increase the viability of our downtown cores and ensure that we meet the needs, the revenue needs of our city's budget.
This is a question that was really common and popular among our community. So, moving away from the policing topic, Mr. Knuth, Could you share the primary sources of your campaign's financial support, including your largest contributors and their respectable locations? Additionally, why do you believe that these major donors have chosen to support your campaign, and what factors influenced your decision to accept their contribution? This will be a minute 30.
Awesome. Let me know when to start. You're okay. Yeah, so when I set out to run for office in January, I had no idea the demand that would be placed on raising money to support our overall goal, which is to contact as many voters as possible. And I'm incredibly proud that the number of individual donations to my campaign is nearly 700 individual donations to our campaign that range from a literal dollar that it cost me more to process the credit card than it did to receive the money, to $5,000, which is the max legal contribution to Ogden City Mayor. If you look at my finances, what you will find is that we have a huge breadth of grassroots supporters. Our average donation sits somewhere in the $250 range, which is something I'm really proud of. And if you look at the contributions from some of my largest donors, what you'll find is that most of them live here in our city. Most of them have a reputation for supporting good candidates and good policy. And many of the max contributions I received are from dedicated public servants and philanthropists in our area who support our vision of getting back to the basics of good government by building community, creating connections with our neighbors, and preserving the character of our city. And beyond that, what you'll find in my financial disclosures is that we're committed to building coalitions across the political spectrum, and that we want to see our mayor's office reflect the will of the people, which is what we plan to do come January. Thanks for the question.
Mr. Nadolski, same thing.
Thank you. I haven't counted the number of
Individual contributions, I know it's in the hundreds. Certainly we've got friends, family, neighbors, community members, tons of small donations. Those add up to quite a bit over time, actually, especially when it's in the hundreds. As my opponent mentioned, the $5,000 contribution limit does make it a challenge to raise a large sum of money. But one of the messages of our campaign that has resonated surprisingly well is when I started this campaign, I was really intent on creating economic opportunity and economic development that was fair, open, transparent, and competitive. I want to return to fair market principles in economic development. And when I started sharing that message, I was shocked at how many contractors, engineers, architects, developers, builders, construction industry people love that idea. They want an opportunity to compete. They're tired of seeing individuals who have connections get the work in the city. And I want to give them an opportunity to compete. That's been something that has led to a good windfall of campaign support. And when we're having those conversations, every single time I say, and they say, I say, this means nothing. I owe you nothing. I'm doing nothing for you. And they said, I only want an opportunity to compete. It was amazing feedback. But more importantly about my finances is what's not on it, and I'm not supported by SimGill.
That takes us to our follow-up that was specifically requested by the community. Mr. Knuth, you've received donations from individuals like SimGill, who is known to be an open critic of some police. So why, and how can the public safety community entrust that this won't influence your actions as mayor?
My answer is the same as Mr. Nadolski's, which is that I am not responsible for the actions or decisions of any of my donors. In fact, Mr. Nadolski took $30,000 from a single Ogden family, and that has not been brought up at all. So if you have a question about SimGill's stance on public safety and policing, ask Sim. I am here to represent the interests of my policy agenda and of my platform, which is getting back to the basics of good government, which is exactly what we plan to do.
Mr. Nadolski, do you want to go ahead and explain some of that $30,000 donation that Mr. Knuth had brought up?
I'd be happy to. If anybody knows the name Hall, that's a huge family. They're very philanthropic. They're very successful, and they're hugely engaged in our community. As a family, they contributed to my campaign. I'm very thankful for it. It's all right there on the financial disclosure. It's all on the up and up. I don't see anything wrong with getting contributions from an entire family. My own family did the same thing. You all should be aware of that too. But we're not quite in the same position as the Halls. But no, I have no shame in that whatsoever. I'm happy to have their support.
Yeah, a minute 30.
All right. Again, I'm Kyle Indahar. Thank you all for making it tonight. I have a couple questions for each of you before we return to Akira and finish this out with a lightning round. First, Mr. Knuth, we'll begin with you. What is your plan for when public interest doesn't align with city officials' interests?
A minute and a half. You know, this is a great question, and I think it does come down to our platform of what it means to get back to the basics of good government, which means being responsive, which means listening to our community. Now, public interest often doesn't align with the interests of the city as it exists today. And I think that that's a result of the lack of proactive engagement with our community and the reactive engagement that most of our elected officials in Ogden City have engaged in. You know, I've talked a lot about the proliferation of citizen-led groups that are addressing issues that are important to them, from the Marshall White Center to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center to the Union Station, and now the 21st Street Pond. I just met with a constituent today about that topic. So I think when we're talking about alignment of public interest, we're also talking about interest convergence, and how if we really hold space for these conversations, if we really get down to the nitty-gritty of asking our community what they want and how we can best serve them, we will have better outcomes. I have proposed the revision of our budgeting process as a city to shift towards a participatory budgeting model, which would actually empower our entire community to help align their interests with our interests as a city, especially with the number one tool we have, which is the way we spend public funds. This is not only the morally correct decision to do to involve as many of our community members as possible, but it's a fiscally responsible decision to make as a city.
Mr. Nadolski, same question. What will you do when public interest doesn't align with the city's officials' interests?
Thank you.
What I've learned in my 20-plus year career in public administration, public policy, and public finance, as well as almost 8 years now on the city council, is that there's nothing basic about governance. There's nothing basic about leadership. Most of the time when I see a disconnect between what the public wants and what the city is trying to do, it has a lot more to do with how we're doing it and how to do it. It's a lot more complicated than most people realize, and I think that we need to make sure that we're giving one another the grace to work through those complications. It is very challenging at times. There are limited resources, yes, so we all need to be making decisions on how we are spending our money and on what. My belief is that when I'm elected on the city council and when I'm elected as mayor, that is a reflection of our community's conscience, that the values that I have espoused and shared throughout our campaign are reflective of what the community wants. That's what a vote is intended to be. And so as I am serving, I feel like the values that I just espoused in my campaign is what people want to see happen. If there is some divergence in those interests, that's where we need to be listening to the feedback of the public. I think we can be a lot more proactive in the way we get feedback. The way we do it in my industry is we create community committees that are built on specific stakeholder groups that are connected in the community that have impacts on those issues, and we get their feedback and we ask them to go back to the community and get feedback and then bring it back to us again, and that creates a good feedback loop that can close that gap.
Okay, this question goes to you as well. Ogden City is a diverse and vibrant community with various perspectives and needs. It's essential to address the concerns of minority populations and advocate for their voices to be heard. It's also important to ensure that other members of the community, including first responders, feel respected and supported. Can you share your approach to representing the entire community without neglecting their concerns or creating divisions based on political movements? And how do you plan to balance these priorities in your role as mayor?
Excellent question, thank you. So I'm proud to have been on the city council when we established the Diversity Commission. At the time when we established the commission, our hope was that we would have a set of community members who have connections in our community that we don't all have. and that we would be able to work together as a commission, as a council, and as a city to make sure that we're having those kinds of conversations, building those kinds of relationships. Over time, unfortunately, it's become a really politicized body. And anytime we talk about politics and diversity, it gets really touchy. I would really like to change the way that we operate on that commission to a way that is really active and actively serving people. One example would be just in this last week, I've had a meeting with a number of partners and people who want to contribute to an all abilities playground in Ogden. They want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for kids right now that don't have it. And that's going to require a really broad partnership. I think the Diversity Commission is a really good venue to have connections in the community, have connections with nonprofits, to go out and make sure that we're building those kinds of projects. And I think that the Diversity Commission's looking for that kind of engagement. Part of why they got frustrated is because they weren't engaged well enough. And part of why they weren't engaged well enough is because when they were, it was politicized. So if we give them something real, something to work on with real people that makes real impacts, I think that would make a real difference.
Yeah, please.
Ogden City is a diverse and vibrant community with various perspectives and needs. It's essential to address the concerns of minority populations and advocate for their voices to be heard. It's also important to ensure that other members of the community, including first responders, feel respected and supported. Can you share your approach to representing the entire community without neglecting the concerns or creating divisions based on political movements, and how do you plan to balance these priorities in your role as mayor?
Yeah, this is a great question, and the plan is what we've already been doing. I mentioned earlier about those meetings that took place a few summers ago between Chief Watt and diverse members of our community. When we had those initial conversations, I remember pretty distinctly having a conversation about who should be included in the monthly meetings that we were to embark on. And I made it pretty clear to Chief Watt from the beginning that I wanted to make sure it wasn't just his deputies and sergeants in the room, but that it was on the ground law enforcement officers. The same way that I made it important that it wasn't just the people who are in charge of the NAACP or LUPEC in representing our minoritized communities. And so we had beat cops, if you will, talking to regular citizens and having a conversation about solutions to engage our community and build trust between our law enforcement officers and general community members. And we did just that. You know, there is a data transparency dashboard now on Ogden City's website for the first time as a result of those conversations. We're fully staffed on the Ogden Police Department, and we have engaged in better hiring practices that have resulted in more women and officers of color being hired onto our force in recent years. So something powerful really does happen when we come together to address these problems and solve them together.
Now I have two questions for each of you left. This is going to be mutually exclusive. The first one is going to go to you, Mr. Nabelski, and that is, how do you plan to work with other local councils to reduce homelessness and aid in its effects, like specifically with Salt Lake City?
How are we going to work with Salt Lake City?
And other local councils.
Okay.
There's a lot we can learn from
Salt Lake City, starting with, I don't want to be like Salt Lake City. Homeless. I know that my opponent works in Salt Lake City, references Salt Lake City, calls the housing stability group that he wants to create the same thing as the Salt Lake City, but we are Ogden. I think it's hugely important that we are working with all of our stakeholders in our county. However, there are so many service providers and also other cities in our county that can help us with our issues. I've already met with some of the mayors in the county, and they are really, really eager for Ogden City to be at the table, finally at the table. We are the only city that doesn't show up to the county-wide mayor meetings, but those mayors need our help as a city. We need their help. I think that they are on board to help provide the deeply affordable housing opportunities that our homeless advocates need. So I want to work with those other city councils and other mayors and other service providers across the county to make sure that we're providing that. Because the last thing that we want to do is not work together and end up in the situation that Salt Lake City's in.
Okay, Mr. Knuth, this question goes to you. And that is, what does the expansion of the OWN in Ogden include, and how do you plan to enforce that?
Absolutely. The Own in Ogden program, when I leveraged it for my first home in 2015 or 16, was a $10,000 grant, well, loan really, that is required to be paid back when you sell the property. At the time, it was geographically restricted. Since it's been expanded to include the entire city. And what we've seen with similar programs across the country from municipal governments is the expansion of the actual dollar amount that homeowners can apply for. In our current market, where an average sell price in Ogden is well into the 400,000s, that doesn't even represent a 10% down payment. So when we talk about expanding the Own in Ogden program, we're talking about the dollar figure of actual money available to borrowers here in Ogden City. But I would actually like to see that amount increase. The available funds increase for public safety officers and school teachers and other public servants like postal workers and other people who work for Ogden City in the various departments. Not only that, but I think that we can be more creative in the ways we're providing other loans. There are municipal governments who are funding entire loan programs for public safety officers and teachers alike. So the solutions are there. And I don't think that it's a problem to be looking to neighboring cities and cities across the country and understanding what works and what doesn't work. And I'm really proud to work in a municipal government where I can learn both do's and don'ts. And that's what I'm ready to bring to this job come January.
I do have one follow-up to that. For that, you'll have 30 seconds. And that is, where will this money be coming from?
It's a continuation of the answer that we gave earlier around the expansion of sales tax, but it's also a conversation of leveraging our community development block grants from HUD. There's also countless federal and state programs, as well as private philanthropy, that are looking to address housing and housing affordability. We have one here in Ogden called the Rocky Mountain Homes Fund, which has been around since I was working at United Way, and they're looking at shared equity models, which are incredibly innovative, forward-thinking, and would fit perfectly within a housing stability division.
Okay, Mr. Nikolsky, final question from me, which is, you earlier called the police the most fundamental need we have in Ogden, and you further said that you don't support police reform. It is with that that I ask you, how do you plan to respond to those, especially college students, who are actively asking for police reform? How would you respond to them?
I would respond with the way that I responded to the question. I think police work in the United States has a long history and track record. It is built up over time. The policies that we have are based on best practice policies across the country. I think that it's hugely important that college students or anybody understands the work that our officers are doing, why we have the policies that we do, why the laws are in place that we do. There's a continual improvement of those over time, just like every other industry. But when I said I am against police reform, I'm against it in the way that I hear it used in popular lexicon, which is that there's some kind of a need to defund our police and destabilize it and start over. Absolutely not. I don't support that. I think that would be the most irresponsible thing we could ever do. We have to have our basic safety accounted for. And if we're going to defund them and try and change everything about the way they're doing, that's going to destabilize our communities, and I think that it's hugely irresponsible.
Final question. Mr. Knuth, how will your resourcing specifically aid for large call volumes in respect to the police effort that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. This is another incredible, innovative, forward-thinking partnership that Ogden City and Ogden City Police Department have been engaged in for several years now, and that's a partnership with Weber County and the creation of a mental health crisis outreach team. This is the team that should be responding to mental health calls. This is the team that should be alleviating the call volume of non-life-threatening, non-emergent situations. Now, are mental health calls emergencies? Absolutely. And resourcing a 411 line with experts who understand the difference between a noisy neighbor and someone having a mental health crisis it's an important distinction. But in the Real-Time Crime Center and in this partnership with MCOT, we have some of the best in the state working to approach these issues with forward-thinking, innovative, and entrepreneurial ideas that are setting the standard for public safety in and around Ogden, but also in and around the entire state. That real-time crime center is quite frankly one of the most innovative solutions to public safety that we've seen in this city in decades. And so when we talk about alleviating the call volume, it's about resourcing our officers with people and information to respond to the appropriate calls with the appropriate level of staffing by the appropriate person, be that a social worker in the MCOT team or a sworn officer in our law enforcement apparatus.
All right. Got a few more questions here. Unless y'all want the 2 minutes back, we'll just keep going with them.
Is lightning round?
No.
Okay.
Not that easy. All right, these are more abstract questions, so I may not pull you for an answer, but I will push for one if it's not there.
Okay.
Mr. Knuth, is it more important to win an honest election by representing what you stand for, or is it more important to win by any means possible?
Running an honest campaign. This is an easy one, and it's exactly what we've done every step of the way. You know, and I'm glad we can actually talk about this and put this to rest, because I know there's been conversations by my opponent and people connected with his campaign about the way we've run our campaign over the last 10 months. And you know what, quite frankly, this conversation is a distraction from talking about the real issues. When I'm at the doors and when I've, you know, personally, I've talked to thousands of Ogdenites on their front porch, they're not bringing up the insider baseball, which is politics. They're bringing up their concerns about making rent this month. They're bringing up their concerns about living in a city where they can walk at night down the street with a feeling of safety, and they're more concerned about air quality and how we will continue to create a city where our future generations can live. And you know, the only thing you will find me saying about my opponent is that I consider him a friend and that he's a good man running a good campaign and has brought incredible ideas to this conversation the same way our campaign has done. And it's what we're going to be doing for the next 25 days in having this conversation about what our city needs to move forward together and to involve as many people in our decision-making process as is humanly possible. Thanks for the question.
It's a no-brainer. I'd rather lose clean than win dirty, 100%. That's actually something that our team talks about often. We're all lock and step in agreement on it. It has been a really hard experience. I've never run for mayor before, and I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't know how hard it would be in the ways in which it was. I'm actually glad that we have started to talk more to make sure that these next 25 days are something that we can make it through together, because it's really important that when Ogden gets through this election that we are not divided when we're done. There's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser, but Ogden needs to be the winner no matter what. And we have had experiences in our campaign, and I don't want to blame my opponent on that personally. There are people surrounding both of our campaigns that we don't even know who they are and we don't know what they're doing. And when those things involve my family, when there are personal attacks on my wife and on my children, when our bank account is broken into and we have to start over from scratch with our finances, that's a big time problem for me. And when my phone is ringing off the hook, both from constituents asking questions and so on, but oftentimes with warnings about what to look for, I have to be mindful of that because I am a father and I am a husband. I'm not just a candidate for mayor. I'm also a man who lives in this community, and the things that are happening to us are not okay. It's not okay. So moving forward, we're going to continue to run a clean campaign, and I'm glad that the two of us are talking about it because as individuals, we play a huge role in making sure that that stuff stops.
Perfect. And that's actually an excellent transition to my next point. Unfortunately, one of you two is not going to win the election.
Really?
Sorry to break that to you. But we'll start with Mr. Nadalski. What can you promise to your opponent if you do end up becoming the mayor? 30 seconds.
I promise to support Ogden, support you to make sure that Ogden is successful. That is the fact. We have very real disagreements in policy and approach, no doubt about it. But we both share Ogden and our love for Ogden in common, and our future is the thing that ties us together. I'm not walking away from serving this community no matter what. I'm going to raise my kids here with my wife. So we're here for the long haul, and we're going to be right with you.
Yeah, I think that the premise that it's a win-lose situation is a little reductive, and I've said this before, but I think that we should start thinking of elections as you either earned enough support to represent the general constituency of Ogden, or you didn't. And what it takes to actually win is 50% of the vote plus one person. And so what I promise to you, Ben, is if I do win, is to spend my entire term attempting to do right by the people who did not vote for me, in earning both their trust and their respect in the decisions we make on their behalf, because we are not just the mayor for the people who voted for us, we are the mayor for this entire beautiful city.
Now, our last question today. Promises, again, but this time for the venue. What can you promise public safety officers and our law enforcement that you will do in your first 90 days as mayor to help them? Mr. Canoe, 30 seconds.
Oh, this is a great 30 seconds. Oh my gosh. There's so much that we need to do in the first 90 days, but I have committed to jump-starting our general plan and ensuring that the general plan is the most community engaged and human-centered general plan that any municipal government in the state has ever undertaken. Beyond that, I also want to make sure that we address the very real concern, which is officer pay, and ensuring they have the pay to remain competitive in the larger scheme of things. And right when we start in January is when that budget process will begin, and that's when we'll begin our participatory budgeting process.
Thank you. I promise, not just in the first 90 days, but throughout my entire tenure, to make you my priority. I just can't think of any service that's more important than public safety or more fundamental to our future than public safety. I also promise to always act with integrity and to be honest in the work that I do. I promise to get in a car and do ride-alongs with you in my first 90 days. I promise to never make you a political pawn in the headlines. I promise to never pass judgment on you and your actions in the field without having a clean, clear process, ever.
Now, before we move on to our closing statements, which you will each have 2 minutes for, unless you want 30 seconds. Okay, we'll do 2 minutes. Kyle's going to come up and have a lightning round real quick. Just respond with yes or no answers. Following that, we'll go immediately into your closing statements, and then we'll have comments by our hosts this evening.
Okay, we'll just do answer 1, answer 2. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay. First question is, will you keep UTA OGX free?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have a plan to address pedestrian safety?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you support the $98 million jail bond?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you believe in the demilitarization of police?
No.
Nice and easy.
Mr. Nadolski, go ahead and start with your 2 minutes.
Well, thank you again for the pretty sporty night. Good job on the moderating, frankly. Thank you everybody for being here. We have a really important decision to make as a community. I hope that I've shared with you the experience that I have. In the last 8 years on city council, I have learned a lot about public safety. Not how to be a police officer, that's not what I'm saying, but how to be an elected official for police officers. One of the things that I learned when we were at an Irish bar in Washington, D.C., and we were trading challenge coins when we were there for a fallen officer, there were police departments throughout the entire country. And one of the officers from a department in Kansas told me, he said, Ben, you as an elected official have to remember, and this is a huge lesson for me, you guys, the words you use in your position matter. The way you use your voice, use your position, and use your mic really matters to the police officers, because when they make decisions in the field, split-second decisions, they have to know that their elected officials are not going to use their voice to create political points for themselves. That is so important moving forward. And you can't get to that point and know that lesson and apply that lesson for you guys without experience. I won't claim to have ever been perfect, but I will claim to have learned from my experiences, apply those experiences moving forward, and making sure that you have an opportunity to serve in a way that you know that your actions will be judged fairly and objectively, that they will not be served or judged subjectively, and that you will not be upon in any political scheme. It's too important that you guys are safe and that you serve in a way that you are comfortable with and that you trust. And I want to make sure that you have that by being the mayor that doesn't speak through the headlines and doesn't prematurely judge your actions, but gives you a fair shake and a fair and honest opportunity to serve our people with integrity. And I want to be there with you as we serve our people. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. I'll close with how I started, which is a thank you. Thank you to Akeem and Kyle and Sergeant Fisher, the Fraternal Order of the Police, and of course the Weber County Sheriff and this incredible training facility that we're all here tonight. You know, people like me aren't meant to run for office, and I'm fully aware that being the mayor won't be easy. But it should be simple, and government should be simple, because we know that when the basic functions of local government are met, we have a thriving community where people feel like they belong, public safety is prioritized, and people have a fighting chance to compete in our economy and within our community. You know, when we talk about the basics of good government, building community, creating connections with our neighbors, and preserving the character of Ogden, we do that with our public safety apparatus, because getting back to the basics does start and end with public safety, which is what we've demonstrated in our policy proposals throughout this entire campaign. And it's how we'll live in a Knuth administration, in putting people back at the center of local government. You know, the city building has been closed for longer than 2 years now. It's open now, but for the better part of the last 3 years, the city's front door was closed to our community and closed to your voice, both literally and metaphorically. And so we're about opening those doors. And, you know, in my first year in office, I want to paint murals on every floor of the city building with your faces there, because that's where you belong. That's where our community belongs, and every decision we make is at the center. And so, you know, we're asking for your support come November 21st. It's just 25 days away. We're asking you to visit taylorforogden.com to sign up for your yard sign, sign up to volunteer, and talk to our neighbors about the issues that are important. But, you know, our future is on the ballot this year, and I hope that everyone in our community who is eligible to vote exercises that right. Thank you.
What would politics be without an October surprise? So I am back. I forgot to ask our community for their questions, which is why we're here. So is there anybody here that wants to ask a question to our candidates this evening? Yeah.
Taylor, you talk a lot about the small businesses coming in and being the foundation. As a former 20-year business owner in Weber County, it's difficult to be a small business owner. It's more financially difficult. How do you propose that's going to happen? How are you going to support those small businesses? And how are you going to build a plan that's going to support them in the community so that they can actually be successful? Because small businesses have the highest failure rate of all.
Absolutely.
Restaurants specifically. So what is your plan to bring them here, support them, and help them get the financing they need to actually build that foundation?
For those online, Anna just asked a question about small business and how we can support them. First off, we need to say that the cinnamon rolls at Jesse Jean's were the best. And when you guys went out of business, there was a hole in my heart. But very seriously speaking, when we talk about small business retention, we also should be talking about small business expansion and providing the resources for our small business owners to really thrive. You know, during the construction of the bus rapid transit system, we shut a lot of roads and sidewalks down on 25th Street. And during that time, I actually proposed to the City Council a small business construction mitigation grant, basically a program that acknowledges that harm was being done to small businesses along this transit corridor. And with the exception of council members Chaburka and White, the idea was dead in the water. It didn't have any support. So I would like to see the creation of a small business construction mitigation grant to make sure that our small businesses who will be impacted by our growth can thrive. In addition to that, I believe in non-government organizations and their partnerships of our work. Swazo Business Center is another incredible service provider to our small business apparatus. The Small Business Center at Weber State is another one. We should be leveraging these partners to encourage an ecosystem of entrepreneurship, but also ensure that our small business owners have the resources, the knowledge base, and really the support systems to thrive. I want to see more roosters who started as small businesses and are now mid-sized businesses across our entire city. Thanks for the question, Anna.
I'm glad that you brought up the cinnamon rolls, because I was reminded before tonight's debate that I was given one of the last cinnamon rolls. They're about this big, and I was supposed to share it with my wife, and I didn't. So if you saw her chafe, that's why. But let it be known, Ben doesn't share food. I don't just believe in the cinnamon rolls. I also believe in small and limited government, and I think that we have policies that are outdated in our ordinance. We were just told on Tuesday night that we have ordinances that date back to pigeon racing in our ordinance. That's from the 50s. That's how outdated we are in some of our ordinances. I really think it's important that we break down regulatory barriers for small business. I do think it's important that we're a partner for business too. There is a lot of infrastructure need in the city. I hope that infrastructure need serves the needs of small business, but I'm open to offsetting the impacts to small business too. But I also want to make sure that we're creating an environment that is worthy of your trust and support. We've got a long-standing reputation for being hard to do business in. I hear all kinds of reasons for it. It's almost impossible to understand and to really dissect from the outside. I'm really anxious to get on the inside and do a really deep dive systems approach across divisions and departments to see where our building, zoning, licensing codes, and see how the teams are functioning, see where the resources are, where are the resource gaps, and where those sorts of things, to make sure that we're not putting up the roadblocks for small business to succeed. That's not government's job. It's to stay out of the way and facilitate success.
Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Most of the concerns I hear from our admin to our patrolmen is the physical lack of bodies to do the work. And even for our firefighters, for our population numbers, for just the capacity of the city, and we've surpassed that. And I appreciate your guys' comments about supporting us financially and compensation, but looking further out for your term, what is your goal and your plan to physically get us more bodies on the street?
So just to summarize, that question was just about plans to address some of the staffing crisis that's going on within our police departments and our fire departments in Ogden City. Mr. Dodalski.
Thanks. So it's really hard to grow your staff when you can't keep the staff that you have. So I think that's the first thing. Certainly that's compensation related, but I think it's also cultural related. Some of the things that I've already talked about creating a department where you're not politicized, I think it's hugely important to keep the officers that we have. But in addition, moving forward, the figure that was referenced in the introduction, 50 officers short based on the FBI study, I've read that study. It's based on median, or the number of officers per capita in a city. We are woefully short in that way. As I think about the need in OPD alone, I see it's possible that need could eat up all of our new growth every year. That's how significant the growth is, or the need is. As we look at calls for service, as we've evaluated it, priority 1 calls get really fast responses. We've got staffing on the street that accounts for those emergency needs. And then as you go to priority 2, priority 3, and so on, we drop down in our response times, and we start to see long response times and lower quality of service because you guys are trying to high grade those priority calls. And I think that we can make sure that we add staff, and I would be looking to FOP and look into the feedback from the rank and file as to how best to do that. I'm not going to come in with a plan and just stick you with it. I want to know what's going to work best, and I think you guys know better than I do, and I'd like to make sure that the FOP has a seat at the table in giving us our input on how we do that.
Awesome. Was that just to him? No. Oh, okay. Thank you. First off, thanks for the question. And a similar answer to what Ben's already talked about. But what I want to focus on is what I talked about earlier with regards to the creation of the Crime Reduction Unit and the Real-Time Crime Center and the very real impact that had on overall crime in our city, but also in how we responded to crime. I feel like reached the max of efficiencies within the systems that we have. And so I'd be looking to our sworn officers and our police chief to be providing innovative solutions to continue to do what Ogden City Police Department has done for decades, which is set the standard for public safety. I talked earlier in a debate about how Chief Young was just voted Chief of the Year. We quite literally have some of the best leadership in public safety throughout the entire state. So the potential to innovate, create greater efficiencies is there. Now, I agree with my opponent in saying that we need to make sure that the people that are within our house are taken care of first and foremost. And then we can begin to address the understaffing. We haven't talked a lot about fire tonight. I've talked about the need to expand the inventory of available fleet vehicles in our fire force to make sure that we have lightweight response vehicles. That would create an efficiency in our system because then we don't need 3 people to drive those long engines. So we can and we should be innovating, and let's take care of the officers that are there before we expand the force.
Can we stay on this one for another minute each?
30 seconds.
Okay. We've replaced a ton of the apparatus in the fire department. We actually need more firefighters on our engines, not less. We need to upgrade up to 4-handed engines and teams. That's another burden that's going to be on top of what we already need for the 50, according to the FBI, for police alone. So those costs alone for our most basic services, astronomical, going to eat up most of the new growth that we accelerate through economic development. So we're going to need to be finding really innovative ways, probably through grants, state legislative relationships, et cetera, for other expenses so that we can keep room for public safety.
I don't need any more. Thanks.
Any other questions from people in the room or online?
An observation that that is for the chosen few, that an honest loss is better than a dishonest win. And I think both of these gentlemen fit that. They're both honest. The only question, the other question that I have is listening to everything. Has there ever been any thought given to a nonprofit cooperative housing development process that the community can buy into?
Yeah, Mr. Knuth, go ahead.
I mentioned the Rocky Mountain Homespun, and that is a homespun innovative housing solution that has received statewide and even national recognition for the way it's addressing housing affordability and attainability in our community. I encourage anyone to go look at the Rocky Mountain Homes Fund. And when I was at United Way, we were some of the first people to invest in this innovative, forward-thinking idea. That was almost a decade ago. So I talk a lot about the innovative spirit that is inherent within Ogdenites, and that's what we've seen in people like Steve Waldrop and the Rocky Mountain Homes Fund, and which has given way to the Utah Perpetual Housing Fund, which are both incredibly innovative, forward-thinking models to address housing attainability that we should be investing in. In fact, Ogden City was given the opportunity to invest in the Rocky Mountain Homes Fund with money from our ARPA grant, which is the big federal relief package that most municipal governments got. We rejected that investment in an innovative housing solution that was forward-thinking and has the potential to really address the underlying causes of affordability and wealth generation in our community. And so I encourage everybody to check out the Rocky Mountain Homes Fund because I do believe it will help aid in the conversation of housing attainability and how we continue to build wealth and generate wealth within Ogdenites of all economic circumstances.
Thank you. The nonprofit community as a whole absolutely plays an important role in housing, plays an important role in our community as a whole. For those ARPA funds, we used a portion of it to provide for the Marshall White Center, which my opponent was actually screaming at us as a council to fund.
Good job.
With signs and all sorts of crazy stuff. But what we need to do moving forward, we have HUD funds. We are an entitlement community, which means that we qualify for what are called community development block grants. They work on a 5-year cycle where every 5 years we can do a big revision to those policies and target how we use them. And then each year you can make small, subtle corrections. But within the guidelines that HUD provides, It gives us opportunities to partner with nonprofits for various service providers, including for homeless services. So I think deeply affordable housing is an opportunity that we as a city don't need to provide, but we need to be leaning on our partners in our community and countywide to help us provide. So we do have opportunities, but it's going to take a forward-thinking policy approach, especially next year when that 5-year horizon is up for the revision of our CDBG block grant.
We've talked a lot about our first responders, which are amazing, and they're the ones who allow me to do my job, so thanks, guys. But we also have a very large civilian staff within the police department, within the fire department, and obviously the city as a whole. Have you guys given any thought on how you're going to support our civilian staff within the fire department, the police department, because we are in on a separate level, I guess, than our sworn officers?
Mr. Nadowski.
I'm glad you asked that because I had that exact thought.
When I was at the community crime conference, 2 weeks ago? That I was shocked at how many non-sworn employees were there. And that's not just from OPD, that's from across the county, right? But it led me to look into how many there were, and it's an astronomical workload. It's a huge contribution for the department to support the sworn effort. And that was when it dawned on me on the cost to make sure that you guys are competitive too. When we do our market analyses, we're not just doing police and fire, we're doing the whole all the employee base. That's 650 plus employees. But we need to make sure that our non-sworn positions are being fairly benchmarked across other municipalities of similar size, of similar service size. We have a challenge in Ogden where we have a lot of people in our county coming to Ogden, and we like that, right? But they demand service too. And so we're not just talking about the number of officers and the number of non-sworn employees and the number of employees at large. We're talking about for the residents that we have, we're also talking about daytime residents too, that everybody demands service. So I want to make sure that when we're making those comparisons, that we're doing it fairly and in an objective way that accounts for the level of service you're actually providing, not what some formula says. I think that's really important moving forward.
Awesome. This is a great question. What I'll say on this is as a public servant, we didn't get into this job for the money, right? Most of us don't make incredible money, especially when you take our jobs and put them in the private sector. But that said, there's ways that a leader within an organization, primarily the mayor, can create better job satisfaction. You know, I was looking at the civilian employee health plan. There's a limit on the number of healthcare visits that our employees for Ogden City can take each year. And now I don't know about you, but there's no limit to the number of therapy visits that I could be using. It's a proven solution to addressing satisfaction of life and of your job. So I'd like to see a health plan that's more inclusive and responsive to the needs of our civilian employees. When I was the chair of the when I was on the Diversity Commission, we commissioned a study from Human Resources to analyze the gender wage gap in Ogden City, and what we found was actually pretty damning. The national average of 75 cents on the dollar looked closer to 68 cents on the dollar for Ogden City employees, specifically female identifying employees, and that wasn't because they were in the same position, they were getting paid less, but that female identifying employees of Ogden City tended to take lower paying jobs. Now, we've seen some really great improvements to this with the appointment of Mara Brown and Lisa in their positions, so I'm sure that statistic will improve, but we need to be making sure that we're setting an example from the lowest paid employee to the highest paid employee, that they are making a livable wage and they have the resources to live a dignified and humane life that has a high level of satisfaction.
Okay, is there any other questions?
Okay, maybe one more.
By all means.
Just one more. Okay, so we're gonna specifically to homelessness. We've talked about what you're gonna do in your first 90 days for public safety. I wanna know in your first 60 days, what are you gonna do to address homelessness, and how are you going to get to the right people to the table to actually understand and educate? What is your understanding of homelessness, and how are you going to help tackle it?
Yep, Mr. Canoe.
You know I have a deep personal connection to this topic. And it's why I approach this topic with such a high level of care and an emphasis on both humanity and dignity, because that is so often lost especially in unsheltered residents who suffer from substance use disorder or another mental health illness. So, you know, jumping back into this conversation is really what I'm talking about, because when I was working for United Way, when I was working for Weber State in their Office of Community Development, I was at those tables. I was making those funding decisions. I was partnering with the incredible service providers. And what we know about the apparatus of homeless service providers here in our county is that we have some of the best in this state. I'm talking Andy Beatles. I'm talking Lauren at the Lantern House. I'm talking Raquel at Family Promise of Ogden. The names you know, I know as well. And I'm ready to leverage those relationships that I've been building over the last decade to provide real solutions, evidence-based solutions, and not only because doing this is the right moral and ethical decision to make as a leader and as a city confronting a crisis that every city in the country is confronting right now, but it's the fiscally responsible thing to do. Prevention is the most fiscally responsible thing we can do, and addressing the underlying causes of the circumstances of being unsheltered is a priority that the next mayor should confront on day one, in conversation and in concert with the partners who are doing incredible work on this, including yourself.
So you're going to watch the news on the 21st. You're going to be tracking on the results of the election. And when you see that I won, what I want you to do is go order an extra large, tall advocate vest, okay? Because I'm not just promising to do a ride along with the police officers. I want to do a ride along with you. I've seen your struggles from afar and from the outside. There's a culture right now in the city where the administration doesn't want us too close to you as a council, and I think that's really unfortunate, because I need to understand your challenges a lot more than I'm allowed to, quote, allowed to. I'm not given access to you and the work that you do on the daily. I need that access. So I promise to you that I will do that ride along, and I promise you I do wear an extra large tall, and I'll sign that purchase order when I get there. But what I've seen, and I remember watching a video online of a meeting that was with the state homeless council, where they're talking about doling out state funds to help local communities with homelessness. And I saw a huge disconnect between the need that we have and what our mayor was doing to provide for that need. We were the only city that day that didn't step up and say thank you and take the funds and put them to use locally. We actually turned down the funds that we were offered that day. And I see big time disconnects in our leadership for you that I want to help fill. But I need that to start with a basic, not a basic, but a very real understanding on the ground. And I want to do that alongside you. And I want you to have my ear, and you can tell me exactly where you need me, not where I need you or dictating the terms of you. I want that information to be informed on the real impacts, and I'm really counting on you to do that for me.
Any other questions? Or a third?
I might. You better close. Just gonna say it.
All right. It's clear that after tonight, Ogden is going to be in good hands. So in a minute, I'm going to challenge you here in round 2 of closing statements. In 1 minute, we're going to go back to right where we began. Ogden will be in good hands. It's clear after tonight's evening. But Mr. Nadolski, you tell us first, why should they be in your hands?
Because I have the experience to pick up and work from day one, to lead from day one. Experience is more than just years of service. Experience is lessons learned. It's years of engagement. It's years of investment in giving, learning hard lessons and learning easy lessons, the good ones. But what I've learned is that leadership in public administration is nothing basic. Getting back to the basics, whatever that means, to me does not fit what I see the role needing. I want to make sure that this city has experienced leadership that has an ear for what the community wants and needs, but also doesn't just hear what that message is, but knows how to put it into place to make it work for them. That's where I think we can promise a lot of things or say, yeah, that's my priority, or yeah, that's important. But unless we know how to do it, it's really easy to identify problems. It's a lot harder to lead towards solutions. And that's why I want to make sure that we've got, that I have that opportunity to do that.
This really is the last question. Okay. It's like, Annie. I promise more than sentiments. I promise solutions. And for the last decade, that's exactly what I've been doing. When the Marshall White Center pool closed in 2017, and this administration and this council sat on the issue until 2021, when a critical mass of the public came to confront the indecision and the inaction of our elected officials, I was there all along helping to garner community support to address our most pressing issues as a city. It's a commitment that I demonstrated during COVID and the creation of the Multicultural Task Force that quite literally saved lives. It's a solution-oriented approach that I demonstrated during our summer meetings with Chief Watt and Sheriff Arbonne. So what I am offering in this race is a solution-oriented approach that has a demonstrated track record and a commitment to our community in involving you at the center of our decision-making process. That's my promise. That's been my promise since day one, and it's the promise that I'll keep to you in office.
Thank you to our venue tonight. We'll go ahead and hand it over to Derek, right? Derek.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who came out, came to watch, and definitely the candidates. This is probably, all the debates we've done, one of the most exciting ones we've had. I think that a lot of that goes up to the moderators for all the energy. If you these guys saw, I had a list of questions that was written out, and these guys rearranged them, they worded them, and made them stand out a lot better. So. First, again, I just want to thank everyone, especially the moderators and the candidates. I know it's a lot of stress, a lot of work that goes into these, and you still have about just under another month to go before you're finally done with it. But this ballot's going to be mailed out soon, so we encourage everyone to read into the candidates for any additional details, reach out to them for any additional questions. You guys said you had 3 more debates coming up? At least. Yep. At least 3 more debates coming up, so if you think of anything from tonight, you're welcome to reach out to those other debate forums and get those questions asked. So, again, thank you to everyone, and drive safe and have a good night.